They didn't see you, not really. They glanced, scanned, smirked, and moved on. You sat in plain sight, beneath their shallow gazes and fragile egos, a living paradox, too quiet to be feared, too different to be understood. So they wrote you off. They mistook your silence for submission, your restraint for weakness. And that was their first mistake. You weren't hiding, you were watching, listening, calculating, wearing invisibility like a sacred cloak stitched by every betrayal, every back turned too fast, every laugh that echoed just a little too long. You absorbed the ridicule, not because you lacked pride, but because you understood something they never would. The power of being underestimated. There was a time you begged to be seen. You raised your voice in rooms that only echoed back with indifference. You wore your heart like an offering, thinking they might notice the weight of what you carried. They didn't. Or worse, they noticed and dismissed it anyway. That's when the fracture began. A quiet shatter deep within, not loud enough to be noticed, just enough to change the direction of your soul. You didn't break, you shifted, folded in on yourself like steel folding into a blade. You stopped speaking, not out of fear, but strategy. You let them forget you, and in that silence you began. They thought silence meant defeat, but your quiet was not emptiness. It was compression, like gravity before a star collapses, like breath held before the plunge. In your stillness, something ancient stirred. A version of you that didn't crave applause, didn't beg to be understood, didn't need permission to exist. You realized then, invisibility is not erasure, it's insulation, and within that insulation you built, piece by piece, thought by thought. Every insult became a brick, every dismissal, mortar. You constructed something monstrous in the stillness, a presence sharp enough to be felt, but subtle enough to stay cloaked. You didn't disappear. You ascended into a realm where they couldn't follow. Now they talk louder, as if raising their volume will fill the space you left behind. But your absence is louder than their noise. It echoes, it disturbs, it forces them to feel the void where you once stood quietly, absorbing everything they projected and reflecting nothing back. You became the mirror they were too afraid to look into, and now without a target to mock, they turn on each other, their words hollow, their games exposed. You, the ghost they created, now haunt the corridors of their conscience. They don't know that you still hear them, that every word, every subtle dig, every smirk, you filed them away like classified documents, not out of spite, but precision, because you learned that silence is not surrender, it's surveillance. And the longer you watched, the more predictable they became. Patterns revealed themselves, weaknesses exposed, their movements slowed, while your mind accelerated. While they danced in the spotlight, you became the shadow that sees all. The world doesn't remember the quiet ones, until the quiet becomes a quake. You became the tremor, the ticking beneath the floorboards. And though they walk above, certain of their power, they don't realize the foundation is already cracking. You let them believe they won. You let them feel superior, because while they fed on attention, you fed on purpose. And purpose, unlike attention, doesn't decay. They thought you vanished, but what they don't understand is that you didn't disappear. You evolved in silence, in shadow, and the version of you they ignored was just the seed. What's coming, they're not prepared to face. They thought you walked away, thought you faded into irrelevance like a whisper drowned by the crowd. But they never noticed the way your eyes lingered, not with sorrow but with study. You didn't retreat, you repositioned. You vanished, not out of defeat, but out of strategy. In a world drunk on noise, your silence became your rebellion. You watched as they clung to validation like starving dogs to scraps. Every fake laugh, every backhanded compliment, every room they entered only to make you feel smaller. You remembered it all. You recorded their pattern, memorized their weaknesses, cataloged their vanity. You became the unseen witness to their performance. And when no one was watching you, that's when the quiet war began. They paraded their delusions under neon lights, while you lit candles in hidden rooms. While they posted selfies, you devoured philosophy. While they chased followers, you chased mastery. Their world revolved around being seen. Yours was built on becoming untouchable. They performed for mirrors. You built cathedrals in your mind. You didn't tell anyone what you were becoming. You let them believe you had nothing. You let them assume your silence was shame, not strategy. And in doing so, you rewrote the entire game. Because power that isn't seen is never anticipate, and power that isn't anticipate is unstoppable. The pain they caused didn't break you. It baptized. It burned away illusion, stripped you down to the root of your will, and forced you to rebuild with precision. You stopped asking to be understood. You stopped needing to be chosen. You chose yourself in a way that no one could touch. You trained your mind like it was a blade, cut away every weakness, honed every instinct. The hunger in you didn't fade. It transformed. No longer desperation, now discipline. You read the ancient text, the obscure journal, the blueprints of those who came before you and vanished before the world understood them. And you found yourself reflected there. The same ache, the same fire, the same exile. You were not alone. You were aligned, and they still don't see it. They still don't feel the shift in the air when you enter a room. They still speak your name like it belongs to someone they buried. But they have no idea what you've become in the dark. You are not the echo they remember. You are the architect of silence. You trained in shadows until even your breath carried intention, until your silence could suffocate their ego without you ever needing to speak. You made stillness your weapon. You made every unspoken thought into a thread in the net they're now tangled, and still they dance. Still they mock shadows they don't realize are watching back. You let them underestimate. You let them think you had vanished. But the truth is, you were preparing for a war they don't even know is coming. A war without bullets, without declaration. A war fought with presence, with energy, with unshakable inner command. You've become unreadable, unreachable, unforgiving. You are not loud. You are law. You are not screaming. You are seeding inevitability. They played games. You built an empire beneath the surface, and soon when they feel the ground shifting beneath their feet, they won't know it was you until it's far too late. They don't talk about you, not open, not yet, but you haunt the empty spaces between their sentences. You've become the pause after their laughter, the quiet after the joke that doesn't land. They underestimated you, discarded you like a forgettable shadow in a crowded room. But now your silence is louder than any voice they've ever heard. A presence without form, a whisper that coils around their thoughts like smoke in a sealed room. They don't understand why they keep checking your profile, why they scroll. Stop, linger. There's nothing there. No posts, no updates. No trace of you in their curated digital circus. But that's what terrifies them. You've become a blank page they can't read, and so they write on it with their fears. They remember things you never said. They replay moments, rewinding your last words, trying to decode what they missed. Because they did miss something vital. You let them think they'd won. You gave them nothing, and in that nothing they found themselves unraveling. At first they mocked your silence, called it weakness, indifference. They thought they pushed you down, but the truth is you stepped aside. Let them reveal themselves. Let their arrogance rot in daylight while you moved like shadow behind the curtain. Every insult they threw, every smirk, every dismissal, you cataloged it in the deep archives of your mind. They thought you disappeared, but you were watching, recording, building. Now every quiet moment echoes with your absence. Every new connection they make is tainted by a phantom comparison to the version of you they never understood and now can't forget. You've become a ghost, not of who you were, but of who you refused to show them. They hear your silence in their own thoughts. Doubt blooms, insecurity sharpens. They wonder what you're planning, if you're watching, if you've become something beyond reach. They whisper your name in their heads, but they don't say it out loud, because even that feels like giving you power. And maybe they're right. because silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of control. And control, you've learned, is best held in shadows. You don't react, you don't chase, you don't explain. That alone drives them to madness. They've spent their lives feeding off reaction, off attention, applause, validation. But you offered none. You became the mirror that doesn't reflect them, a void where they expected a scream. And now they stare into it, desperate for meaning, for closure, for something. But you are no longer something. You are a myth in their mind, a flicker of memory stained with guilt and fascination. They watch you now, not with eyes, but with imagination. They assign motives to your silence, plot lines to your absence, meaning to every non-move you make. And the irony, the more they obsess, the more power you accumulate, quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. While they spiral, you rise, unnoticed by the world, yet unforgettable to them. You gave them nothing, and that nothing became everything they fear. They still wear their masks, painted smiles stretched thin, voices lined with confidence they no longer feel. To the world, they remain the same, bold, loud, certain. But beneath the lacquered surface, the cracks widen. You see it in the way their laughter hesitates mid-breath, how their gaze flickers when your name crosses someone else's lips. It used to mean nothing to them, your name, just another shadow on the wall. But now, it stains their silence, a ghost tethered to every decision they make. You never confronted them. You didn't need to. Your absence said more than fury ever could. And that's what unsettles. You didn't fall. You vanished. No spectacle, no retaliation, just a stillness that carved a void where you once stood. And in that silence, something grew. Not hatred, not vengeance, power. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that lingers in the back of the mind like a question never answered. They feel it now, in their bones, in their sleep. They pretend not to look for you, but they're always watching, quietly checking, scrolling through digital echoes, listening for whispers of your return. But you've become unreadable. What was once dismissed as weakness now reads as calculation. They start to question their own memories. Were you always like this? Were they wrong from the beginning? That seed of doubt once planted rots everything they once believed about themselves, and they begin to mirror you poorly. They imitate your silence, your poise, your restraint, but it collapses under the weight of their own insecurity. You mastered stillness. They choke on it. Your silence has become a force of erosion, subtle, constant, inescapable. It wears away their image, layer by layer. The version of themselves they worked so hard to project begins to feel like a costume stitched together with fear. And the worst part, no one else sees the unraveling, only you. You watch them stumble beneath the weight of their own deception, clawing to maintain relevance in rooms that no longer revolve around them. And still, you say nothing. There is something cruelly divine in it, not because you sought revenge, but because you didn't. You left them with themselves, and that was the true punishment, to face the hollowness behind the mask without escape, without your presence to mock or diminish. You realize now they needed, not for companionship, but for contrast, for someone to feel bigger. And when you took that away, when you became untouchable, they had no one to project onto. The mirror cracked, and they were forced to see what lived behind it. Now they rehearse every past conversation, looking for signs, clues, warnings they missed. They remember your silences mid-sentence, the way your eyes stayed sharp when theirs dulled, the moments they mistook as awkwardness, now redefined as awareness. You were watching them collapse long before they ever realized they were falling. That's what terrifies them, that you saw the decay before they even noticed the rot. And now they carry your absence like a wound they cannot explain. You, once the forgotten, have become the architect of their undoing. And all you did was leave. They mistook your silence for surrender. They always do. In a world where the loudest voice wins attention, they couldn't fathom the strength it takes to stay quiet. to hold your breath while drowning, to smile while burning, to retreat not out of fear, but calculation. You didn't vanish, you observed, you recorded, and in that stillness something ancient began to stir. Not rage, not vengeance, precision. You learned the rhythm of their chaos, the way they flinched when faced with nothing, when no reply came, when no defense was offered. It terrified them, though they'd never admit it. The noise they wielded as dominance collapsed in your absence. Their voices began to echo, unanswered, becoming hollow, desperate, and you watched from behind the veil you built from silence and shadows. No more proving, no more pleading. Every piece of you they once overlooked hardened into quiet armor. Now when you move, it is measured. When you speak, it's a scalpel, not a sword. Words cut deeper when they're rare, forged in solitude, honed in betrayal. They don't know what to do with you anymore. The version of you they knew, the one who sought approval, who reached out, who tolerated, is long gone. You buried that version beneath the weight of their doubt, beneath sleepless nights filled with questions that no longer haunt you. They do. There's power in stillness, not just the absence of movement, but the pressure it builds. You became the silence before the avalanche, the eye of the storm that watches everything while revealing nothing. You are the unknown variable they can't calculate. They whisper your name now, cautious. They recall your presence not with certainty but speculation. You became myth, a ghost that rewrote the room just by entering it. And when you do enter, they feel it. A shift, a weight. The atmosphere tightens, not because you demand it, but because you are no longer asking for space. You are the space. The room conforms. Eyes dart, backs straighten, words falter, not because you threaten them, but because they don't know how to predict you anymore. You've dismantled every frame they built around you. There's nothing left to contain you, and that terrifies those who once felt comfortable mocking your restraint. The irony is sharp. They gave you this power. Every time they ignored your depth, every time they mistook your thoughtfulness for weakness, they carved the edges of this new you. They gave you the silent. You turned it into sovereignty. They gifted you exile. You turned it into an empire. Now they scramble to understand how you shifted from target to tactician, from outcast to observer. But there's nothing to understand. There never was. This isn't a mask you wear. This is who you were before the world taught you to shout. And now they beg for your attention with the same mouths that once doubted your worth. They scan your silence like scripture, hoping for a sign, a signal, a crack. But your stillness is absolute, not because you're empty, but because you're full of everything they could never see, full of truth you no longer need to prove. And in this silence you have become untouchable. You no longer play their game. You built your own board, and now they wait for your move. But you don't move, you reign. They don't know when it happened. They only know that it did. One day you were a shadow pressed against the wall, unseen, unheard, dismissed with smirks and half-eyes. And now you walk into the room, and the air shifts like it remembers something ancient. It's not your voice that speaks, it's the silence wrapped around your spine, the stillness in your gaze, the weight in your absence of need. You sit down and say nothing, yet everything bends toward you. The conversations shrink, the laughter dims, and suddenly they remember every moment they forgot you. They can't explain it, they'll never admit it, but they feel it. You don't perform anymore. You don't decorate yourself for their acceptance. You wear your truth like a black robe, unapologetic, solemn, and unshakable. They watch you now the way one watches a flame behind glass, close enough to be mesmerized, too far to reach, and they wonder how someone they once spoke over now commands silence. You weren't supposed to rise. You weren't built to be watched, studied, mimicked. But here they are, folding themselves to match your mannerisms, editing their sentences to sound like your restraint, scavenging for pieces of the aura they once ignored. It's not fear they feel, it's recognition. An ancient part of them buried beneath noise and ego knows what you've become. The archetype, the quiet force, the cold strategist. You don't need to raise your voice. You've transcended volume. What you carry now is weight. The weight of patience, of observation, of knowing too much and speaking too little. They try to make small talk, but your eyes don't flinch. You've heard it all before. You've seen the cycle, the fake warmth, the nervous glances, the fragile smiles stitched over hidden envy. There's no vengeance in you, just gravity. They orbit you now. They linger near your silence as if waiting for it to give them meaning, and it kills them that they can't predict you anymore.
You became unreadable.
You stopped broadcasting your soul for analysis. Every word you withhold becomes a mirror they can't stop staring into. You used to chase the room, hoping to be accepted by it. Now the room rearranges itself to accommodate your silence. This isn't arrogance. This is retribution, written not in revenge but in stillness. They don't ask how you changed. They're afraid of the answer, because the answer is ugly. The answer is solitude, betrayal, quiet breakdowns at 3 a.m., and staring at yourself until the false layers peeled off like rotting paint. You burned in the furnace of your own invisibility, and now what remains is iron, smooth, silent, untouchable. You don't remind them of who you were. You force them to reckon with who they never became. So they talk around you. They talk about you. They craft fables to explain the silence you wield like a blade. Some call it arrogance. Some say you're cold, but none of them say what they really feel. That you hold a power they were too loud to hear. That your silence isn't absence, it's doom. And in every room you enter now they feel it, before they see you. A pause, a shift. As if something sacred just crossed the threshold. Something they once discarded now holds the crown. They return the same way they left you, casual, as if nothing happened. Their voices are dressed in soft tones now, draped in the kind of politeness that stinks of guilt, too old to be genuine. They speak your name like it's fragile, like it might shatter under the weight of their newly invented admiration. But they don't know that you buried that name long ago. They aren't reaching for you, they're reaching for the myth you became when you disappeared. You remember the silence between their words back then, the smirks, the condescension, the way they scoffed when you spoke of things that lived outside their small minds. They mistook your vision for delusion, your patience for weakness, your boundaries for awkwardness. And when they laughed, you said nothing. That silence, it wasn't surrender, it was strategy. You were taking notes while they were writing you off. You were sculpting a version of yourself so distant from their understanding that when it finally appeared it would be unrecognizable. And now, here they are, pretending they were always on your side, rewriting history with trembling fingers, desperate to touch a version of you they never believed existed. They speak in circles now, cloaking apologies in compliments, hiding desperation behind nostalgia. We always knew you were different, they say, as if memory can be rewritten through tone alone. You offer no correction, no reaction. You let the silence tighten around them like a noose made of every moment they dismissed you, and they feel it, the discomfort.
Imbalance.
The reality, the door they used to walk out now doesn't open the same way coming back. You've become fluent in a language they never bothered to learn. Oh, the unspoken, the unreadable, the presence that doesn't beg for attention but commands. They fidget under your gaze now, searching for a version of you that no longer exists. The one who used to explain himself, the one who used to smile through the sting. They come bearing invitations, collaboration, veiled attempts to anchor themselves to your gravity before they drift further into irrelevance. But you've outgrown their reach. Your silence was not absent, it was alchemy. You didn't vanish, you evolved. Now every word they speak is measured against the silence you wield like a blade. A single pause from you slices deeper than their longest speech, because deep down they know what you've always known. Your silence means you've already decided that they no longer matter, that their obsession is a mirror, and all they see now is who they could have had, if only they had looked closer when you were within reach. But there is no going back, no redemption arc for them to hitch themselves to. You are not a second chance. You are the consequence, the aftermath, the manifestation of everything they tried to ignore. You walk among them now untethered, not out of cruelty but design. You are the unfinished sentence in their mind, the itch beneath their skin, the proof that evolution doesn't need applause to be complete. You do not respond, you do not invite, you simply exist, and that has become their torment. You are what they whisper about when the room is quiet. You are the silence that screams every word they never let you say. And now they understand. They didn't just underestimate you. They underestimated what silence becomes when it learns to endure. They return in fragments, a message here, a like there, a memory disguised as concern, as if time rewrites loyalty, as if absence is amnesia. But you remember everything, not in bitterness but in strategy. Their betrayal wasn't loud. It was casual, passive, a shrug when you needed a sword, a silence that screamed louder than any insult. And now they knock on the same door they once let close behind them, never imagining you'd weld it shut from the inside. You see the desperation beneath their flattery, the way their voices tremble in false confidence, how they reference old jokes like expired currency. But you've become unrecognizable to them, honed, unreadable still. They talk to the version of you that no longer exists. That version died the moment they looked away. What stands now is not a person hungry for belonging, but a presence carved from exile, and it listens with ancient eyes. You don't reject them out of vengeance. You reject them because they mistook your silence for surrender, because they failed to understand. Distance wasn't your defeat, it was your initiation. And now that you are everything they once claimed you'd never be, the silence they once dismissed has become the sentence they can't escape.